All right, now the clock is going. So, hello, everybody. I am your host, Eric Smith, and today I am with a writer, artist, podcaster. This is my favorite horror with pause to build suspense. I don't know why I would do that. Your name is on the title of this video, and you're sitting right there. But it's Matt Wildasin. Hello, Matt.
Hey, how you doing, man? Thanks for having me back on again.
Thank you for being here. Let's start with now, if I'm not mistaken, this entire year you've been reading werewolf books and watching werewolf movies. Is that? No, wait, that's
That,
the
that's
other.
that's my cohort Summer Cannon's been doing that.
That's Summer that's doing that. Well, what
Yeah.
have you been? What have you been reading? What have you been watching? What
Oh,
stands out for you lately?
I mean, I've the reading that I've been able to get in since we had our son Vander back in January has been more minimal than I care to admit. There's not a lot of time to get away from things. Movies have been kind of staying the course for the most part. Haven't been seeing anything new just because, again, you can't really take a baby to the movie theater. You blow their eardrums out. But, I've been revisiting a lot of my favorite films, like having him watch them with me. And I'll have to restart Godzilla movies because when he first came home, we were doing the shifts at night, and I took like the first and the third shift. So I would get like from 11 to 2, and then I would wake back up around like 5 and do like 5 till he decided to wake up in the morning. But that 11 to 2 shift, I'd put Godzilla movies on, or I'd watch MST3K, but he would always end up falling asleep before Godzilla usually showed up to do the Godzilla stuff. So I was like, I have to revisit this when you're older so you're awake more, and maybe you'll be like, yeah, this is great.
Nice. Um, you mentioned MST3K.
Yeah.
I have a Samsung TV, and they have on the Samsung TV channels, they have a Rift Tracks channel.
Yeah, Rift Tracks
That-
is great too.
That is my background.
Yeah.
It is on almost constantly if I'm home. If I'm reading, I turn the TV off. Obviously, if I'm watching something else, but when I'm checking emails or doing anything, and I need noise when I go to sleep, that's what's
Yeah.
on is Rift Tracks. And since you mentioned Godzilla, I guess I'll jump right into this part.
Sure.
Any thoughts on Godzilla -1?
I am extremely excited. Like I I love the idea that they're doing where it's taking place essentially during like the first Godzilla, like that time frame post-war and everything, and this is like the idea that he's coming on shore and they're going to lose even more than they've already lost, hence the -1. It's just like I love it. And it's a little sad to see them going the all CGI route because I still feel like the whole like man in a suit, like even though you can tell that that's what it is, I feel like it still looks more real on camera than CGI does. But to be fair, the CGI doesn't look bad either. Like
Right.
for their second full length CGI movie, it looks good. Like I thought Shin Godzilla looked good, even though I thought his design was kind of goofy. But like the CGI looks good, and I feel like I love seeing it go back to Godzilla being a destructive force of nature. Like, don't get me wrong, I like the monster versus monster movies; those are fine. But my favorites always were like monster comes on shore, destroys everything, reminds man that they're not on the top of the food chain, and goes back into the sea. And it's just like, yeah, I'm still alive. You don't know when I'm going to come back. You can build Tokyo for the 5 billionth time, but I'll just show up and break it all to hell.
Why do you keep rebuilding? You just know I'm going to come back and destroy it.
Yeah. They should just make like inflatable homes there. It would save them a whole lot of money.
There you go. I think it's supposed to hit American theaters in December, if I'm not mistaken.
From what I saw, yeah. So
You gonna?
I might have to go by myself. I don't know.
I was gonna ask if you thought. Do you think you're gonna get a chance to actually see it in the theater?
We might do the babysitter thing then, just because my wife's excited to see it too. she didn't really she knew of the world of Godzilla, but until she met me, she didn't realize how vast it was. And I was like, so wait, you only saw this and this? Like, you have 50 other movies to watch.
Well, the Godzilla universe is expanding.
Mm-hmm.
Are you? I don't know if you're a comic book guy.
I am.
Are you going to be picking up Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong?
Oh, I pretty much figured I was going to, yes.
And are you going to spend the $15 on the Godzilla Roar cover?
I mean, that's a tough one. I haven't spent $15 on a comic book in a long, long time. I'm assuming that's a trade, though, right? That's issue 1.
Yeah, issue 1.
Oh,
you
okay.
get a Godzilla Roar or a Kong Roar.
Okay.
And they're $14.99.
I'll probably go Godzilla Roar. Why not? I love Kong too, don't get me wrong. The original King Kong is I love Kong too. I don't want people to get me wrong. The original King Kong movie is my favorite movie of all time.
Nice.
I mean, and like when you go to film school and stuff, like they always want to shove Citizen Kane up your ass, which is fine. It's a great movie. There's stuff in that like at the time no one else was doing, but the special effects that went on in King Kong and the methods that they used to achieve that at that time period are astounding. And it still looks good to this day when you go back and watch it.
Kong is fantastic. And, of course, someone of my age, I just remember it was a Thanksgiving tradition.
Oh, that's cool.
Long before, VCRs didn't exist. So you watched what was on TV.
Yep.
And every Thanksgiving, I don't know why. I don't know who decided it was a holiday movie. I don't even remember which network it was on, but every Thanksgiving they showed King Kong.
That's awesome.
And every Thanksgiving I watched King Kong because I love that movie. I've been trying to cut down on monthly comic books.
Yeah.
Even though this is just a mini series. So I'm waiting for the trade paper. The collected edition is when I'll order. Although I might pick up the first issue.
Yeah, that's what I've been kind of doing. If there's something that strikes my fancy, I'll get issue 1 for collector purposes. And then I just kind of wait for the trade to come out. Like if I like issue 1 enough, I'll be like, okay, I will get the trade when it comes out. If it's just kind of blows hot and cold, it's like, there's a lot of stuff in this world that's catered to people to buy nowadays. And you got to start being smarter with your cash.
Absolutely. And then a little more Godzilla. I got this yesterday. It came in yesterday. I believe it just came out. And that is this little...
Yep, I have that too.
Got your copy of it?
Yep, I pre-ordered that the second I heard it was available.
I put it on my wish list the second I heard it was available. And I go through my Amazon wish list and look on the side and see if it still says pre-order or if I can actually order it. So very excited for this.
Yeah. If I remember that, if I have my stats correct, that's the first time that's in print in a long time, at least, if not the first time ever on the States.
I believe this said that it's the first time in English in the States.
Okay. Yep.
But yeah, very, very excited for that.
Yeah. That's a milestone book if you're a Godzilla collector. Like, you got to get that.
Absolutely. And I didn't pull it off the shelf. We talked about this a little online. Now I can't remember if it was earlier this year or last year during Barnes & Noble's Criterion sale. I was able to pick up the big Godzilla.
Yeah. I think that was this year, but like very early in the year, I think.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful collecting. Like
beautiful book.
It's almost like a piece. And honestly, like the art is fantastic. I've had that cover, like the turquoise and magenta cover, on my phone wallpaper for like ever like ever since I saw it. I was like, that's great.
It was one of those cases where I just happened to be in a position where I could grab it because of the sale.
Yeah.
You
Oh
know,
yeah, it's expensive otherwise.
yeah. But I was able to get that. I got a Bruce Lee box set.
Nice.
And got. Did you ever see the movie Versus? The Japanese movie Versus?
I probably have.
It's like a
Because it sounds very familiar.
Yakuza zombie samurai movie.
It's ringing a bell.
It's really because it's modern day, but swords and
Okay.
these woods where the dead come back to life. It's a wild movie. I got to pick up I think that was an Arrow, but
Oh,
part of the
Arrow
sale
Video.
as well.
And there are
But
so many companies bringing this stuff around that didn't have physical releases before. Like,
it's a great time to be alive.
It is. If you're
At least
if you're
if
a
you're
movie
a fan of
collector,
things.
it's what's that?
I said, at least if you're a fan of things. There's some things
Yeah.
in the world that make it not so great, but
Yeah, very true there.
I talk about the again comic book collections,
Mhm.
and I'm able to get the stuff that I had as a youngster
Yeah.
that I had sold. I've sold my collection twice. And for me, since I'm not worried about having the original material, I just want the material.
Yeah, you just want the stories, yeah.
Getting epic collections, getting omnibuses. I squealed a little, I think, when it was announced that Marvel was going to be able to reprint their Rom the Space Knight and Micronauts stuff.
I did see that, yep. Very
Um,
underrated character, Rom.
I loved both of those runs. I've already got the ROM omnibus on order, and the Micronauts is in the new catalog, so I'll be
Nice.
ordering that. But I got
Very nice.
their Planet of the Apes from the 70s that Marvel did.
Oh yeah?
Got the omnibus for that.
I'm glad that they're doing reprints of stuff because, as if you're a comic book collector, you know, even keeping it doesn't last forever. Like, and
Right.
you have to do like some major upkeep if you want to keep your old books in good condition. Like acid-free bags, acid-free backboards. You have to change that shit out like annually, sometimes biannually if you want to be, anal about it. But yeah, it's a labor of love to keep your old comic books around.
But we've got video companies doing essentially the same thing with movies.
Yeah.
We're seeing these titles that, as you said, never had a physical release.
Yeah.
Or has been out of print for so long.
And we're getting foreign stuff too that never was here before. You'd have to you'd have to catch a torrent online if you wanted to see it, or every now and then. Well, back in the day, I don't know if they do it anymore. I know HBO used to show foreign films every now and then. It was like a very small time window where they would do it, but yeah, like I don't know. I remember it was HBO. I watched Seven Samurai for the first time, and I was like, "This is fucking awesome, man!
Yeah.
Where are these movies at? Like, we need more of this stuff."
That's my next time they have the sale at Barnes and Noble. I'm going for the Kurosawa.
That's a good choice. Can't go wrong.
I did like the previous time. I got the Lone Wolf and Cub box set.
That's a good one too.
Which was nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do need. Actually, I just had Mike Lombardo yelling at me again for not having a region-free player because I had ordered, and I now have, because it finally came in this super edition of the movie May, which I absolutely love that movie, and I didn't realize when I ordered it that it's from Europe.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I don't have a player for this, and it's just a matter, of course, of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I want to get a region-free player, and that opens up a whole new world of things that you can get and watch.
Oh yeah. I have to double check because I know some of my video game consoles are region-free players. I have to double check which ones are, but it's always a thing. Like I love that you can get region-free players a little bit easier now than back in the day. Because it always sucked, like trying to like, oh, I want this movie, and it's like, oh, that's a different cover. Why is that a different cover? Oh, it's region this. I'm like, shit. Like,
Yeah.
and then you get really mad because you're like, why can't we just all have the same code? It's just universal. We all just watch movies.
Why can't we all just get along?
Yeah.
There was, I don't know if you ever saw Blood Drive on Sci-Fi.
I have not.
It was a series on Sci-Fi. It was on at 10 o'clock at night. And it was, except for nudity, it was completely uncensored.
Okay.
Super strong language, super gore. And the only physical copies of that I can find are European. So that's my other incentive to get the region free players, so I can get that. I loved that show. It was the cross country race, cars that are fueled by blood, a huge corporation that runs this thing with shenanigans going on behind the scenes, and each episode was kind of a different genre of horror.
Okay.
And
that's cool.
It was, and they had fake ads. Because the name of the show was Blood Drive, but the show within the show, because the race across the country was a reality show called Blood Drive. And they would
so there was like in-universe ads and stuff.
Yeah, there were in-universe ads. And I thought it was amazing. It only lasted one season. It introduced me to Alan Ritchson. You know who that is?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. That's the first time I ever saw him.
Okay. Wow. I have never heard of this, and I am intrigued right now.
Oh, this show was fantastic. And the guy that plays the main bad guy, I guess you'd call him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was on that alien invasion show with Noah Wyle. Falling Skies? Is that the name of it?
That sounds familiar, yeah.
That guy, I can't remember his name, but he's amazing in that show, in Blood Drive. His performance, even though it's a TV show, should have won an Oscar. But yeah, I highly recommend it. I don't know if it's streaming on Sci-Fi anymore or on demand or anything, but
I'll look into it. That sounds. You had me when it was like cars fueled by blood. I'm like, what is this? This is awesome.
Yeah, the first scene. So not really a spoiler, but it's an incredibly sexy woman on the side of the road, hood on her car up. A couple of guys pull up to help her and possibly sexually assault her.
Yeah.
And then she just turns the tables, kills them, and fuels her car with them.
That's awesome.
And that's like the first 5 minutes.
That's a great opener. That's awesome.
So, yes, absolutely. But again, the whole point was only Region 2. I can't watch it.
I think by the time we're dead, everything will finally be able to be watched everywhere. Because it's happening, but it's still a slow burn. There's still movies that I would like to see where I'm like, I can't get that yet. It's like my wife is a huge. It's better now, but when we first started dating, she was a huge Miyazaki fan, Studio Ghibli, and for the longest time, a lot of their films were still all over in Japan. Like Disney only brought select films over because some of them were more art house and maybe a little more adult than I think Disney wanted to deal with. But trying to find those like as like just gifts for birthday and Christmas or just, for, here I love you type gifts. That was a chore, man. Like some of them were PAL region, but they would also play in the United States, which I was like, thank God, like, somebody over in Europe that's making DVDs likes us that they did this. But like it took a long time. And then all of a sudden it was just like this flip of a switch, and it's like, we'll bring everything he made over to the States, and it will get an official release and all this stuff. And they're like, fuck, I gotta buy this all over again because it plays better with the official releases than the PAL versions.
Right.
Yeah, but I get it, and there's still stuff where I'm like, why has this not gotten a release? Where is the copies of this?
One of my white whales finally came out a few years ago. even though, and I have like I want to say it's Vestron. No.
Okay.
Your syndrome. There's so many people that put that stuff out. Um, and it's a case of, like, if you read the back cover copy, it even says that some of it doesn't look great because they basically they did the best they could.
Yeah.
Remastering with what they had, and that's Massacre at Central High.
Oh, okay.
Growing up, that was on HBO, and I would watch it constantly. I love that movie. And then, yeah, it was only, and so that was back in the 80s.
Okay.
And it's only a few years ago that it finally got a release.
Wow.
But I was so excited when it was finally available.
Yeah, and some of this stuff, like, we were learning quick this year for my one podcast, Grindcast, because we're doing our Spooktober Cinema featurette for Halloween this year, and somebody wanted us to review Deathbed, the bed that eats.
Yeah.
And we were like, well, somebody thankfully is streaming it on YouTube, but Will and myself, we love collecting these obscure movies. And he's like, I think there's a Blu-ray out. I'm going to see how much it costs. And he told me, he's like, well, if I buy it, it's going to be for myself too, because it's like in the $30 to $40 range for this one movie.
Yeah.
But then he lucked out and he got in an eBay bid and won it for like $5. And I'm like, yeah, because it's obscure. Nobody really knows about it unless you know about it, you know? But yeah, some of this stuff, like I've dropped like 40 to 50 bucks on some movies, like even Godzilla stuff, because there's Japanese versions of films that we never got, and the American versions are pretty shitty compared to just the straight up Japanese version. King Kong versus Godzilla is an example of that. It took me forever to find the straight up Japanese version of that film where it cuts out all the boring American stuff, and you got the guy with like a dinosaur book who's like, oh, Godzilla's a mix between T-Rex and a Stegosaurus. Yeah, all that's gone. It's just a straight up Godzilla flick then.
Nice.
But I think I spent like 55 bucks to get essentially what was probably somebody's burnt DVD from over in Japan to ship it over to me.
Yeah. Well, since you mentioned Grindcast.
Yeah.
In my introduction of you, I went podcaster.
No, I get it.
Because I was very sad on Friday.
I was too.
Do you want to talk a little bit about it? We're talking about Ghostwriters Podcast, and Friday, as of this recording, last Friday was the final episode.
Yeah. It came to a head where there's a lot going on in all of our lives. Yeah. And we just, and if you were an avid listener of the show, you've seen there were like 2-3 weeks sometimes where we couldn't get an episode out. And we kind of thought, like, it's not really good to keep that kind of a track record up. And we've just been getting busier. Like, Mary's got projects out the wazoo, so does Summer. And, you know, Summer's got a family. Mary and Brian have just gotten married, so they kind of want to have time together too. And I now have a son. And it was just kind of like, we love doing this, but the time is just really not there. And I was also tinkering with the idea of bringing Grindcast back, because I had canceled that.
Mm-hmm.
That was July that show ended, because at that time I had absolutely no time, because it was also 2 podcasts, writing, cover designs, full-time job, son, you know, and then just trying to actually take care of myself so I don't fall apart and die. But it just, it basically just became a thing of just there being no time. And it sucks. It happens, you know, and we love doing it. Like, it was not anything, there was no bad blood between anybody. We just didn't have time. But we talked about it in the show, and we said during the episode, like, we still hope to get together once in a while to, like, all sit down and watch like a bad movie together. So it's still happening in the background, you know.
Right.
And we'll probably let people know what we're watching when we do those things. But since I like punishing myself, I've been tinkering on and off. Like, this Halloween with the Spooktober Cinema thing is kind of like a tester to see if I can at least keep one podcast around. And if it works, we might be bringing Grindcast back again. And then who knows? It might be around till like I'm 70. And like,
And again, that's why I had sort of the question,
yeah,
because I saw it's the last episode of Ghostwriters, but then there was also a brand new episode of Grindcast,
yeah. I know.
which
I'm
I
a
knew had been
confusing person.
canceled. What's going on?
Yeah, and I thought about that too. I was like, I bring Grindcast back right around the time that this is ending. I'm like, that doesn't look that great. But it was like, no, there's nothing bad. It's just I miss doing Grindcast. Um, Will and Jason and I did that for 8 years, 500 plus episodes. And we kind of became more than just friends. It was like we almost became like brothers out of doing that show. We did so many goofy shit together. We ate so many terrible foods together, watched so many movies, and like we went through the ups and downs of like trying to figure out how to make a podcast successful together and all that. And those couple months where we weren't doing it, like at first it was refreshing. I'm like, I've got all this extra time. And then once that luster of that wears away, you're kind of like, yeah, but I miss like that laughter I had every week.
Yeah.
So when Halloween, because we love doing Spooktober cinema. Maybe Will and I more than Jason, because we watch the movies. He'll sit there and be like, why the hell do you guys do this to us? But I was like
Brian Keene to Mary when she's watching movies for Ghostwriters.
Yeah, exactly.
Why?
I'm sure he feels much more of a relief because he hasn't had to do that anymore. But yeah, it was. I wanted to give it another shot. I wanted to see how it went during October, and so it's great. It felt like just flicking a switch. Like everything ran just the same way it did when it ended. So if things work out, we're thinking about maybe after Christmas, giving it another shot and starting Grindcast back up again. So
nice. Well, that's somewhat similar to what I'm doing with this. Last year when I started this, My Favorite Horror With, I did 30 plus episodes in a row.
mm-hmm.
Did not miss a week for 30 plus weeks. And then just again, the real world job and everything.
Yeah.
Life gets in the way. And so now I'm just sort of doing it whenever.
Yeah, when you have the time.
I can get somebody on and record it, then it'll go up, but I'm not trying to pump one out I'd love to do it every week.
Yeah.
But yeah, just don't have the time. We're scheduled 50 hours a week right now at work.
Yeah, I hear you.
And I work in a factory. That wears me down. And this isn't physically hard to do this, talking to somebody online, but I'm just worn out at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I mean no disrespect by this, but like as you get older, that kind of labor is just, it kills you. Like when COVID happened and I lost my job being a chef at the restaurant that was there, I almost kind of breathed a sigh of relief a little bit, because I was just like, I was getting to even at 39 when that happened, I was getting to that point where I was like, my feet are killing me nonstop at the end of the day. I get out of my car on the drive home and I'm limping up the stairs to get into the house. And I'm like, I don't know how much longer you can keep doing stuff like that. And there were older guys that worked there. Yes. I mean, you suck it up.
Yeah.
But even they said, they're like, I can't do this much longer. This is you're standing on your feet for like 13 hours a day on a tile floor, and it's like, I know I have lower back problems just because of that type of work in general, and there's only so many Dr. Soul's you can throw in your shoes to help you out with that. But
exactly.
It's funny because I switched from doing that kind of a job to one where I'm basically now sitting in a chair all the time, and I'm like, well, this isn't healthy either.
Yeah. Got to find that balance.
Yeah, you do. But
well, let's talk about some of the work that you've been doing.
Sure.
I have a couple. I just want to show off a couple of your more recent works. Now, The Back Rooms is buried. I read it, I reviewed it, and it's now behind things I haven't read yet. There you go.
I don't know if you still put these on YouTube or not, but there we go.
Yes. And
Okay,
yeah,
good, good, good.
this will go up on YouTube on Thursday.
I thought you still did. I just wasn't sure.
But we've got this one.
Yeah, that gem.
And then a cover that I think kind of fits in with what we're going to be talking about a little bit later. We've got this one.
Oh, yeah.
Very lovely cover.
Thank you.
Now, unfortunately, your most recent work was supposed to arrive yesterday and did not.
Oh, good old Amazon.
I do not have up until I don't know how late yesterday, it still said arriving. Yes, there it is. It said arriving today by 10 p.m. And then finally it just switched to arriving now today by 10 p.m.
I don't know what they're doing with their books over there, but like it's a crapshoot sometimes when they get stuff where it needs to be.
It is. But sometimes I'll get it the very next day, and then sometimes it takes forever. But yes, Gore.
Yeah.
Your new one. Tell the folks about it. Tell us all about Gore, please.
So Gore, as I've marketed it online ad nauseum, is a love letter to the Doom video game franchise. I wanted to write this book for a long, long time, but I also had a thought in the back of my head. I'm like, would anybody really read a book about this? And I know that there's a shit ton of actual novels written by more famous writers than I that penned stuff for the actual franchise. It has the brand name of it and everything on it. But I don't know. I was like, if those exist, does somebody want to read it from an indie author? But I came around to like when the Backrooms was done, and I was very happy with how the Backrooms went, and a lot of people seemed to like the book. And I was like, you know what? I wrote that because it was something I wanted to write, because I wanted to write something that was fun. I'm just going to do the Doom idea. So, I started writing that, and as it was going, I'm like, I love this. This is so fun to write. And, like, nice. How many times do you get to sit down and write something where you shove a shotgun up something's ass and blow it to hell? Sorry for the spoilers.
Well, actually, for me, it happens more often than you'd think.
But yeah, I wanted it to be that you knew it was associated with Doom, but it was also its own story. So, it takes place on a different planet, and the whole way everything comes together, because I don't want to spoil stuff for you, because you still have, your book's coming today, hopefully. The way it all comes together is in a different vein than, like, some of the original Dune stories, how they all come together. And I don't know. I wanted a book that was, you get what you need to get out, that the story in the world, and then the whole thing is just basically action.
Yeah.
And from what people have said, I've achieved that really well. Nice. Some of the reviews I've seen, I'm just like, I can't believe people are gushing over this like they are. I was very humbled by it, because when I hit publish on this, I was like, I don't know. I feel like this is going to be one of those books where everybody's just going to fucking hate it, because they either don't understand Doom, or if they're really into Doom, they're like, this is just, this is just fanfic and it's not that great, and just dismiss it. But a lot of people seem to be digging it, and I'm really happy about that. And I might return to it someday.
Well, it's nice when you can really write something for yourself.
Yeah.
And have other people embrace it.
Yeah. And that was my worry, because writing it, I was like, well, I really, really think this is awesome, but that's me, and this is a book I'd read, but that doesn't always translate over to a mass audience of people. But this time it did. I guess I rolled the dice and I got lucky, but it was nice. Like every time I see somebody was enjoying it, even if they didn't enjoy it, like do I have any wood in this office to knock on? Here we go. There, I'll knock on the frame of this door. It hasn't gotten any bad reviews yet, but at the same time, even if it does, just the fact that somebody wanted to read it because of what it was, that right. I enjoy that idea too. Because it's like, cool. Like, I picked something that, even though you didn't like it, you still wanted to take a jump at it,
Has this encouraged you to maybe write some kaiju fiction?
Oh yes. um, I have a short story. I'm in an anthology that's coming out this month now. Yeah, because it's October 1st. It'll be out later on this month. It's through Zervis Publications, and I've been talking with the guy who runs the publishing company off and on, and we become close friends. And he asked me, he's like, "I'd like you to write I'd like you to write a kaiju book in this one universe that you started in your short story collections, like the Horrors Untold stuff. There was an organization I created in these books called the CAP, the Control, Analyze, and Protect. It's a subsidiary of a secret section of the government where they go around basically collecting cryptids. They investigate, hauntings and all like these abnormal things within the earth. And he's like, kaiju would fit perfectly in that universe. So he wants me to write this book, and I'm like, yeah, you want to publish it? We just kind of did an over the internet handshake agreement, and so hopefully that's going to be a summer release next year.
Nice. Very good.
I'm excited.
I'm excited for that.
And that's not the only one either. I'm co-authoring a book with a friend of mine, Alex Bailey. We're taking basically the slashers that everybody knows and loves. We're kind of making them our own versions of them, but it's going to be them fighting a kaiju monster.
So who's the good guy in that scenario?
I guess it all depends on which side you want to weigh in on. But yeah, so to answer that in short, 2 books are in the works for that kind of a thing. So
nice. Is there anything coming out before that?
Well, I'm trying to start to get. I want to get myself back into letting other people publish some of my works, because I don't know. I want to maybe have a book where I don't have to do everything. And not only that, I just think it would be nice to start getting out and branching to other publishing companies instead of just putting all my eggs in one basket and doing it all myself. I'm writing a book right now that I had somebody ask me about, and they're inquiring. So I'm hoping to have that done in the winter. So hopefully that would still be a 2024 release. I can't say what it is yet because obviously I got to keep that under wraps. But there will be another Horrors Untold book in 2024. I used to do them biannually, but I'm switching them up to once a year, because then I figure you get like 13 or 14 stories in a book, because I always write some extras instead of just like 6 or 7. So I figure it'd be a nice beefier book, and it'd be easier to just put one out instead of 2 a year.
Do you prefer or find it easier to write short stories, novel length, or novella length stories? Where's your
I think novellas are much easier to write. When I cut my teeth getting into this, it was mostly all short stories, and I still tell anybody, like, if you want to get into writing and putting your own book together, do a short story anthology. It's easy. You get to try all these different genres of horror out, and then you get a nice little collection of stuff, and you can put that out there. You could even do it yourself, But I've been finding novellas easier as of late than writing short stories, because I've grown as an author, I'd like to think, to the point where I'm not having trouble filling in some of the blanks and the peaks and the valleys that are usually when you first try to write your first big novella or novel. There's always that middle slump where you're like, oh God, now what do I do? And I've been getting better at expanding stuff out and flushing things out and being more descriptive and making it all flow a little bit better than having like the big dips. And with short stories, going back to doing some of that recently, I've been like, oh God, now I got to cut a lot of that shit out, because I'll make novellas if I don't cut some of this shit out of every story. So yeah, that's been a little bit. I got to get back into the swing of it, because for a little while, getting the shorts for volume 6 together, there were a couple months where I didn't get to write any shorts, because just obviously having the son and everything. and it was rough. It was rough getting back into them because I wanted to just write everything in the short. So I'm getting back at it, and it's getting easier. But I guess, in short, again, to answer your question, novellas and novels I think are easier than short stories.
All right. Well, speaking of short stories, perfect segue into what I call the main event.
Yeah.
Your choice for this episode of My Favorite Horror With, your second time on the show.
Yep.
Your choice was Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Yeah. These books are my favorite thing. They're still my favorite thing in the world to read, even as an adult. Like, I've got over here the Treasury edition. So this is like all the books together. It has all the, they went all out on this. It has all the original opening art. It has all the end credit parts. It has all the footnotes of like the origin behind all the stories that are in these books. Because I think what some people don't realize or remember even, I think it was the second book. Most of the stories in that were all folklore. You know, like the hook hand guy, and like, you know, the caller inside the house, and all that kind of stuff. Like, they're all folklore stuff, and I love that because like folklore is another thing I love so much.
There was a period of time that I need to repeat where I was reading a ton of stuff by, now I can't remember the author's name. The last name is Brunvold or something like that, but a guy that writes all these books on urban legends. And not just telling the urban legends, but sort of digging into where they've come from, how they've grown and changed. I want to say his name is Harold Jan Brunvold or something like that.
Okay.
But he's name checked on the Wikipedia article about Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
That's awesome.
Because he is this urban legend expert.
Okay.
But I read those books when they first came out. Absolutely loved them.
Yeah.
Loved the illustrations. And again, I was reading that in the 2011 editions, it's 2001 or 2011, they had a different artist.
Yeah.
Went nuts. So they restored the original art.
Yeah. I'm glad that they did that, because and no knock on that, the newer art. It still was very good art, but when you come to know what was in these books originally, it's not a candle at all being held to the original art. And well, it was Stephen Gemmell was the original artist. Very talented guy, and that's an art style I'm still to this day continuously trying to teach myself to replicate it, because it's just, I feel like it's one of those things, like, if you're not that guy, you're not going to be able to replicate that as good as he did. Like, you can get close, but it's still not going to have that exact same look to it.
Well, that's why with this, I said I thought it was appropriate for what we're talking about, because it doesn't look like his art, but it evokes the feeling.
Yeah.
I think.
Thank you.
Just like the previous volume had the Goosebumps feel to it.
Yes.
So when did you discover these books?
So that's a funny story, and I've told this story a couple different times, but I still think it's funny telling it anyway. These books that I found in my library of my school, and the school that I went to was a private Roman Catholic school.
Interesting.
And it's one of those things where you're like, those were in your school's library. I'm like, I don't know if somebody like that was running the library snuck them in there. Like, they brought copies that they had, you know, they filed them and put them up. Because I wouldn't imagine like that kind of a school would want them to be in that library. But I remember the one day that I rented it, because I was looking for something scary. Like, I don't remember what it was, but there was just something in my brain where I was like, I want to read something scary. Because up until then, I was just reading like stuff like The Old Man and the Sea, which, not knocking it, it's one of my favorite classic literature books of all time. But I was just reading stuff like that, classic literature, you know, Treasure Island, you know, all those kind of stuff that, you know, they want kids to read, essentially. and I just saw like this black spine with these bright red letters. I was like, that says scary stories. What the hell is this? And pulled it off the shelf. And if you remember the art of the original one, it had the big head, like just looked like it was growing out of the ground and everything. And it was creepy as shit looking. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm renting. I'm borrowing this. And I did not sleep well the nights while I was reading those stories. And for them being, most of the stories being a page and a half, my God, did they pack imagery in there in such a short amount of words? And it's just, there are stories to this day that I'll never forget. And some of them aren't even like ones that a lot of people talk about. But there was one where, I can't remember the title of it now. And I said I'll never forget. The gist of the story is a guy is in a rainstorm and he goes into this house to get dry, and there's like a fireplace and he starts a fire. And then like he nods off and wakes up and there's like a cat sitting there. And the cat's just like watching him and he's like, oh, whatever, it's a cat. He falls asleep and wakes up. And then there's another cat. And then they talk to each other. They're like, should we do it now? And they're like, no, wait till, I can't remember even the cat's name, but it was like, wait till the other guy comes. And then he falls asleep again because he's just so tired. And then they're all just like over him, like three cats, and they're like, let's do it now. He's like, I'm out of here, man.
Love it. They all have well, not all, most just have the feel of of campfire stories.
Exactly. And that's another thing I love.
And growing up, we went to church every Sunday, and my parents were the leaders of the youth group.
Okay.
The high school age youth group, even though I was much, much younger than that. But it meant I got to go on all camping trips and everything. Awesome. And so as a very young kid, I was there at these camping, literally sitting around a fire while people were telling these stories. The hook hand on the door story.
Yep.
In here it's the toe.
Yes. Yes.
For me growing up, it was the golden arm.
Okay, that's different. I didn't hear that one. Okay.
But it was essentially it was a woman who had a golden arm, died, someone stole it.
Okay. And they're like, where's my arm?
The footsteps getting closer and closer, and I want my golden arm. I want my golden arm. And then, of course, sitting around the campfire, whoever's telling the story is, I want my golden arm. And then they grab the person next to him. Do you have it?
Yeah.
Always the jump scare.
Yep. There's a lot of the jump scare stories in these books too. And even those are like, they're coming, but they're even fun to read. Just getting like, because they put, if you've never read these books before, they will put like at the bottom of the story, they actually direct you. They're like, now grab this person to your left and scream.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And some of the stories are kind of funny.
Yeah.
Most of them, at least, and of course, when I was young and read them, most of them were terrifying.
Yeah.
The
funny one I think a lot of people remember is the Viper. Because you go through this whole story where it's very creepy, and they paint this one guy who keeps showing up as being like this really weird, odd fellow, and it's just like a guy with like a German accent, and he cleans windows. He's the window viper, the window viper.
Now, unfortunately, this morning, because I couldn't remember all of the story, it's been so long since I've read it, and I need to reread it. So I was looking online at things, and I found a Vulture article that purported to list the 82 stories from worst to best.
Really?
But it's a list that's obviously from someone who's reading them as an adult.
Yeah.
In the modern age.
Right. Because
right off the bat, the lowest ranked story was the toe.
Oh, that's criminal. That's criminal.
And the reason they gave was because this is what they said. The big toe controls 85% of what the foot does. So a corpse missing a big toe wouldn't be able to walk. And I'm like, really? This is the kind of analysis you're bringing to these stories?
When I hear stuff like that, I'm like, have you heard of what fiction is? Like,
the babysitter.
that's a classic.
It was higher ranked, but their
Yeah.
complaint was a landline. Basically, the complaint was a landline. I can't imagine a landline where the phone can just ring. Everybody just has cell phones and puts it on silent.
Oh my God.
Like, what kind of critique? So there were a whole bunch that the critiques were like that.
And they
And
obviously didn't read any of like the befores or afters, because it's like you would have seen the date these stories were penned. Like, and that alone, you would have been like, oh, they didn't have cell phones back then. Okay, so that makes sense. Or it's like, even if you read the afterwards, where you find out where the origins of these stories originated from, they're even older than when the book was written. So it's like,
yeah, it was.
Come on, man.
It was a decent list for me to just get the story titles and mainly what each one, to remind me what each one was about.
Yeah.
Although there was at least one where they really didn't even say what it was about. But I thought it was a horrible list with where I think they were trying to be funny, but to me had no sense of humor.
I mean, yeah. If they didn't straight up say this is for parody, then yeah, I don't. That would anger the hell out of me. Like, The Babysitter is one of my favorites, and I like, even if that's like in the middle, that's not doing that justice either. And that's not me just being, favorited with it, but I don't know. Like, that story itself, the main core story of The Babysitter spawned like how many different stories, and even movies for that matter. Like When a Stranger Calls, that's essentially the same folklore from that.
Yep. And on the Riff Tracks channel, one of the movies they have in heavy rotation is When a Stranger Calls Back or Again.
Or Again, yeah.
Yeah. But that's I've over the course of months I've seen that many times now. Does not hold up to the original.
No, it doesn't.
But yeah, so these stories just now, is this something, I mean, I think this is sort of a redundant or a rhetorical question. I assume as soon as you can, you're going to be introducing these stories to your child.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I will have to talk it over with my wife when she feels that it's appropriate that I give these stories to him. But yeah, I mean, I reread through this book every October. It's one of those like pilgrimages that I make. My October reads are usually this book, and then there are several local authors that pen folklore stories, like the collections and stuff, and I'll read through all that stuff. There's a legendary road around my neighborhood called Toad Road. It's now called Trout Run Road, but apparently this road, if you ever heard of the infamous Seven Gates of Hell folklore story, we have a Seven Gates of Hell in our neighborhood, and it's on that road. And this one author, Timothy Renner, he, I guess he has some kind of special clearance with the local government that he's allowed to constantly walk down this abandoned road, because you're not supposed to be there. There's signs everywhere, like stay the hell out, like you will be shot on sight, like all this stuff. And he has all these books about his times walking down this abandoned road and all the things that he saw. And there's like photographs and, and I know you can doctor photos. I'm very, very well aware of that. I do it for a living, but just some of the stuff, the pictures he's taken, you're like, well, what the hell is that? And there's like skulls that he found that aren't from animals that live around this area. And it's like, well, how the hell did that get there? And then it gets my brain going. I'm like, well, I mean, what are the chances if I just walk down that road that I get shot? Like, can I see something cool, or am I going to get shot?
We have around here one of my favorite names for a road that has our own urban legend, but it's Gore Orphanage Road.
That is an amazing name.
Gore Orphanage
Road.
Which I believe gets a shout out in an episode of Supernatural.
Oh, okay, cool.
Because I believe the creator's from Ohio. So there's a
All right.
lot of Ohio stuff in Supernatural. And the episode, I don't know if you were a fan.
I unfortunately never got to watch the show.
There's a meta episode where because within the show there's a guy who ends up being God, maybe. But when
Okay.
he's introduced in the show, he's an author who's writing a series of books about these two brothers that fight supernatural stuff.
Okay.
Basically, every book he's writing is an episode of the show.
Okay. Okay.
And of course, the Winchester brothers are trying to figure out how this is happening and everything. But the books are so popular that there's a convention. And so there's an episode where the Winchesters, go to this convention to celebrate the supernatural books. And there's super fans and who think that they're dressed up in character.
So they're cosplayers.
They think they're cosplayers, but I think it's in that episode where they mention Gore Orphanage Road. Because I think the convention's in Ohio.
That is, that is a hell of a name.
But,
do you know the reason it's called that, or?
I think it was just because that's where the orphanage was. I don't know where the Gore part comes from.
Yeah,
maybe that's somebody's name, whoever opened. But and of course the urban legend is if you drive down, because apparently the orphanage burned down.
Okay, yeah.
So if you drive down Gore Orphanage Road and turn off your lights and do whatever, that you can hear the screaming children.
Okay.
Died in the fire.
That's interesting, because for our road, the Toad Road, there was fabled that there was an asylum that was down the road that burned down, and you'll hear the screams of the inmates running around in the woods if you turn your lights off. I do love how some of them are very similar, and I think that's one of the things that I love about folklore so much, is seeing the different regions putting their different twists on the same story. So it is like this giant campfire story that gets passed around the whole country, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One of the other choices you gave me when I asked you to do this again was Goosebumps.
Yes.
And the reason I didn't choose that is because that falls into that area where I wasn't the right age when they started coming out. I was a little too old and a little too cool.
Yeah.
Like now at this age, I'm like, I'll read some Goosebumps books. I don't care. But I haven't. I've never read a single Goosebumps book, I don't believe. How do those compare? I mean, I suppose there's a big difference because as we've been saying, with scary stories to tell in the dark, it's a lot of folklore, urban legends, things like that.
Yeah.
Whereas I think, as someone who's not read them, I think Goosebumps is a lot of horror tropes, but all original. He's not taking urban legends and things, or does he do that?
Some of them, yeah. Like, you know, I think that there was like a horseman story and stuff like that, and you know, I would say they're mostly around tropes, because you have stuff like Monster Blood, which is kind of similar to like the Blob, and you have like, you know, the Night of the Living Dummy. Like, how many times has there been horror stories? Slappy, yeah. How many times is there horror stories about dolls coming to life? You know, I'm sure just saying that alone, you thought of one movie in particular. You know, so
sure, Trilogy of Terror.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
What else would anyone think of?
But yeah, I think a lot of people always put when they talk about scary stories versus Goosebumps, most people say Scary Stories was the edgier kids were reading those, and like the Goosebumps was kind of like your mainline, like your marketable horror stories to kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I would mostly agree with that, because some of the stuff in Scary Stories, you're just, you know, you think this is for that age range.
Oh yeah.
But with Goosebumps, you're like, okay, yeah, I get this, because it's like, ooh, there was a ghost, and that's like your spook, that's your blah, you know. Now, but also, to be fair, there are some of the Goosebump books that you read and it's like, wow, that's out there, and like, you know, there's kids that are getting hurt, you know. So and maybe it's just because once you get engrossed in a book that's Goosebumps and you see something like that happen, versus if you're reading Scary Stories where you just expect it to happen, it's more shocking, because you're like, wow, he actually wrote a kid getting hurt. But I I like Goosebump books to me, like when you pick up one and you just see that cover, like nothing compared back then when I was growing up.
Amazing covers.
Yeah. Like I love the art and scary stories, but like the Goosebump books had that look to them where it was I'm trying to compare it to something like for a grown up as far as horror is concerned. Like you know exactly what you're getting into. Um I can't think it off the top of my head right now, but they all just had that look where you know like this is going to be spooky, but it's also going to be fun. It's like a creep show essentially for kids when you look at it that way. Um and yeah, it was just like there's some of the books fell flat, you know. I there were some of them I never bought because it was like the Cuckoo Clock of Doom. I'm like, well, what the hell is this going to be about? like, I'm like, I grew up in a house where my parents were of German heritage, so we had several cuckoo clocks all over the house. And to me, I was like, these aren't scary. I don't care what you do with it; it's not going to be scary to me. But you know, the Sage Cheese and Die books, like a lot of people love those, and one of my favorites always was Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns. It's Halloween night, and these kids are trying to like spook these bullies that they put up with through school all their lives, and they had to do it this time because like they're getting too old. Like Halloween, you know, it's going to be unacceptable to be older and be into Halloween after they've reached this certain age, which makes me laugh whenever I reread it because I'm like, man, if they if these kids were actually still alive to this day, or like if they were real people, the change in their lives it would be to like, oh, I can be a grown adult and love Halloween. Cool.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like these specters take over like jack-o'-lanterns and they're on the heads of other kids, and like it's just this really cool, like almost like Mars Attacks slash like, you know, possession type thing, and it's just really neat. And that's always been one of my favorites. You know, Horrorland, that's another very popular one. Haunted Mask is another very popular one. But each one of them has like their own little spin on stuff, and they're campy fun, I think is a really good way to put it.
Nice. Well, I didn't pull them off the shelf. There's a series, Star Wars Galaxy of Fear.
Yes, I've heard of this series.
12
Yeah.
books that I've heard described as basically Star Wars Goosebumps.
Okay. Neat.
I have 2 of them. There's 12 in the series, and looking online, they range from like $5 to almost $40 for
Yeah.
some of them. I found a couple of half-price books, and I haven't read them yet. Some of them have those awesome holographic covers
Yeah.
that they used to do. I love that stuff. But yeah, I'm hoping to get that sort of Goosebumps feel with Star Wars books.
That'd be cool.
Uh,
I'd have to look into those too. I did not. I knew of their existence, but it was one of those things like until you said it, I completely forgot about them. And
I had 2 until sometime earlier this year had posted online about them, and I was like, oh yeah. And now I have the means to get those. I have the internet. I can find them.
my white whale of like horror YA books to collect are there was, I think it was only 4 books. It was a short series of they were written in the Halloween universe. It was Scream Factory, I think was the company putting them out, but it was all like Michael Myers stories written for YA audiences, and they are so fucking hard to find. And when you do, it's like $300-400 nowadays for one of these books. And then there are times when like I've seen them pop up on eBay, and I'm like, I don't know, I really, really want to have these in my collection. But $400,
Yeah.
like,
Well, that's because I'm an idiot. I had, when they were putting out original new Friday the 13th novels, um, Jason X novels,
yeah,
Final Destination, and Nightmare on Elm Street. I had those. I bought them when they came out. I don't have them anymore because I'm a moron. And yeah, now online, if you can find them, they're incredibly expensive.
oh yeah. There's tons of those like what the hell was I thinking moments. I know, I get you, because I've done that thing with
Okay.
Yeah, I did that things with comic books too. I've gotten it back in my collection, thankfully, but I had a Hulk 181 at a time when
Oof.
that stuff was going really high, and I had just moved out of my house, and like my roommate was like, "Oh yeah, I lost my job. I can't really pay the bills," and I'm like, I'm sitting there staring at this comic. I'm like, "Well, I can get 1,300 for you right now. The market's high." Okay, and I sold it so I could keep us going for like a month or so,
Yeah.
or 2 months or so with the rent. But rebuying it, and it's not as good of a condition that I had originally. I'm like, well, it's here at least, so fuck it. But
I have that in an omnibus, the Marvel horror
mm-hmm.
omnibus, because it's a Wendigo story,
Yep, it's a
essentially.
Wendigo story. Yep.
So it's yeah, I have both volumes of the Marvel horror omnibuses,
I'm the Basai.
which have it's got their short run Scarecrow
Oh
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the Living Colossus, and basically all of their, or most of their, sort of generic horror stuff
Okay.
that wasn't, Morbius
Or
or,
Tomb of Dracula, or yeah.
yeah, Tomb of Dracula. It's all the other smaller things. It's got Brother Voodoo in there, and
Oh
uh,
man, Brother Voodoo.
but it does have the yeah, it's got that Wendigo storyline. So that's my copy of Hulk 181 is just that.
Okay. Well, hey,
Uh,
it's good to still have the stories, even though to me that one, like I've read it a couple different times because it was like I got the book, why not take it open every now and then. It's kind of a goofy story, but Wolverine shows up, so that's why it's worth so much money.
yeah, and that's a case of, I think someone else made Wolverine the character that we know and love today.
Yeah.
He was a generic character in that. I mean, it was his first appearance.
Yeah. I mean, he had some of the basic powers that everybody knows today, but yeah, over the years,
He also
much
had
like this,
whiskers on his costume.
yeah, he had whiskers on the costume, yeah. But it's one of those things like over the years, things change, much like with Superman. Like a lot of people, I don't think realize, and I know I'm getting like way off topic now, but
That's what we're here for.
okay, a lot of people don't realize Superman didn't fly at first.
Mm-hmm.
He ran fast and he jumped. That's how he got to where he was going. And yeah, like you hear Superman, you're like, oh, he just flies. It's like no, he didn't fly at first, and it wasn't until like around the like All-Star Superman area where he became like almost a god in a sense. Because that was like that story where he's like, oh yeah, like I'm absorbing too much sun and now I can lift like 500 quintillion tons. And it's like, there's no point of having you now at this point. There's nothing that you can run into. Like,
He was actually at that point back in the 80s, but pre-crisis, where he
pre-crisis.
could
Okay.
blow out a star.
Yeah.
Which is why after Crisis, and when John Byrne did Man of Steel, they
Yes.
really depowered him. They wanted to bring him back.
And I kind of always liked that version of Supes more because it's like, and that's the thing. I like Superman as a character, but when they do the overpowering stuff, it's like it loses that connection of humanity to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, yeah, I get it. He still has that backstory. It's like, oh, he was raised by farm people and he knows what it's like to be a human. But for a reader, you're like, well, I can't get with this. I don't know what it would be like for that. Like,
Right.
just being able to fly, like, yeah, that would be cool. I could imagine what that's like. But yeah, and I liked always when he wasn't as strong, so he had to actually think about
Yes.
what he was doing. He just wasn't going in and just flicking the bad guy into space, and that was the end of it,
Right. All right. We'll swerve
Yeah,
back
we'll
around.
swerve back to horror now. Yeah.
Last night I watched Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Yeah. Surprisingly good movie.
Okay, that was I was going to ask what you think of
Yeah.
it.
I
What do you
remember.
think of?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, what do you think of the choices of the stories they used?
I think they chose some of the best ones, honestly. And it fit within like the universe that they were creating. Like it matched to the characters that were in the movie, which I thought was really cool. Um, it's one of those films where now I kind of, to me, I was like, when I heard how they were doing the film, I thought it was a very interesting avenue to take.
Mhm.
Because when they announced this, I was like, oh, they're probably just going to do like they did with the Goosebumps movie, where it's like the stories from the original author just kind of like come to life and wreak havoc in the town. And it's like they find the old books or something. And like they kind of did that, but it was more like, I'd say it's almost like Scary Stories meets Silent Hill, because it became like a personal horror for the people that found the book instead of it for everybody surrounding them. And it was, I found it interesting that they took it, the story took place during the Nixon years.
Yeah.
Look, it's a back seat. Well, not a back seat. It's in the background. It's not like the main focus, but it was interesting. I was, because I guess they wanted to put that whole thing in there where these events might not be that scary if you had cell phones.
Right.
And like modern conveniences. Back then it was like you had to get to a payphone, or you had to get into somebody's house to call somebody.
Right.
So it was more danger at risk.
Although they did have the walkie-talkies.
Yeah, well, and that's the other, like this movie also came around the time when like Stranger Things was a very popular series going on, and you get a good bit of the Stranger Thing-esque vibe from this movie. And that's not to knock it. It's just like they do the walkie-talkie thing. Every kid has like a nickname for each other in the friends group. They find like this one person that's like the renegade outlaw character,
Mm-hmm.
And then you have your bully who's on the football team, who from the very beginning of this movie, they're trying very hard to make you hate him. Like
and
overly
they
hard.
succeed.
Yeah, you do hate him, but it's like some points it's like, just calm down.
Yeah.
You look like you're possessed. Like from the very beginning of the movie. But go ahead.
Please.
No, I was just, it for whatever gripes are there, it's a really well shot movie.
Mm-hmm.
For kid actors, it's really well done. Like their acting's good. And the effects are great, which of course, from a Guillermo del Toro movie, you're gonna get like some really great looking monsters out of it, and he nailed all of them. Like the Herald sequence, I'm like, that is amazing.
Yeah. So do you feel they captured the illustrations from the book?
Oh yeah, I feel like I absolutely did. Like the Me Tidy Dough Walker part, where he's coming down through the fireplace of the police station, which I thought was interesting, but like it was just the way they made him look, and he was grotesque, and he was like breaking his own bones to get through the jail cell bars to get after the one kid. I'm like, I didn't even think about that reading the stories when I was a kid, that it was aware that it could do these things. I just thought it was like, this is what it was like for that monster. Yeah.
And it was reading some trivia about it. That was they had a contortionist, and it's,
oh, cool.
You've got a real person CGI enhanced. Right. And then obviously some parts are obviously CGI when it's just body parts coming together.
Yeah.
But I like that they used practical where they could.
Yeah.
When I started watching it, now it's a PG-13 film.
Yeah.
And as we're meeting the characters, I'm like, yeah, this is kid stuff. I can enjoy it for what it is. Then it went much darker than I expected.
Yeah, my first viewing of this, I had that same thing. I'm like, again, I was it's going to be a Stranger Things type scenario, maybe a little softer because it is PG-13, but it's a hard PG-13. When the monster stuff starts happening, it's horrific deaths that come in. Like the first guy, not the spoilers for the listeners or anything. And if you don't want to get this movie spoiled, maybe skip ahead until you stop hearing us talk about scary stories.
Oh yeah, I usually say that before we start talking about this. I usually say there's going to be spoilers. Yeah. So thank you for doing my job.
No problem. The football player is the first kid to die.
Yeah.
And it's through Harold. Like he lives on a farm with a farm like his parents are farmers, and they're like telling him to go out I think they told him to feed the chickens, if I remember correctly.
Oh, he's got to go deliver eggs.
Deliver eggs, that's what it was. I knew it was chicken based, which
Yes.
got him where he was going. So he has to go collect the eggs, and they have Harold. That's their scarecrow in the cornfield. And for some reason, this kid hates Harold, which I thought was a little, I'm like, you could have explained a little bit more why he hates the scarecrow so much. He would just walk by it and just punch it. So I don't know if it was just like his dummy because he didn't like his dad, maybe. Kind of a little fill in the blank yourself. But Harold, of course, comes to life, as you would expect. And you think it's just going to be like Harold's going to get to him and just kind of like snap his neck, like that soft slasher movie type kill. But no, the dude himself starts sprouting hay from inside his body. It's coming out his eyes, his mouth, through under his nails and his hands and stuff. And he just dies. He becomes a big hay man.
And through the holes in his abdomen because Harold stabbed him with a pitchfork.
That's right. Yeah.
And there's hay coming out of that. Yeah.
That's right. Because he gets stabbed and he looks down. And he's like, I'm not bleeding. And he just starts running away. And then the hay starts pouring out.
So, yeah, we have young adults, high school kid aged people dying. We have, they're victims. I was waiting for, because this is all happening as the stories are being written in the book.
Yeah.
I was waiting for that resolution where Stella would write something that would bring her friends back.
Right.
Everything's back to that doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't happen.
Her friends are still gone.
Yeah.
The bully is still a new scarecrow in the field. The sheriff who got his neck snapped.
Yeah.
Is dead.
And I like that they want that. They want that bittersweet ending, and I appreciate that, because if it was a Goosebumps movie, everything would be back to normal, And again, not knocking Goosebumps, but that's kind of how it would end. Everything would be back to normal. Anyone that died would be alive again, But no, every person you see die stays dead.
The sister,
she loses all of her friends.
Has a huge scar on her face from where the spiders came out. Spoilers.
Oh yeah, the one guy's sister. Yeah, they do the spider out of what she thinks is like a pimple.
Spider zit.
Yeah, the spider zit. They do that one, and I hate spiders. So that scene alone, because like she's in her high school bathroom trying to put powder over it to make it less noticeable, but it's like a huge goiter at this point.
It gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah. And then it just explodes, and the whole room is cut. Like the lights are even dimmed out because there's that many spiders in the room.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh God, gross shit.
Yeah, very, very effective movie.
Yeah. I think my favorite death, and it's probably the least gory one, but it was the visual way that it was directed, was the lady in white in the hospital. Because he's just I can't remember the name of the story, but there's a story in the book where this guy wakes up in this strange room, and then there's like this really grotesque looking blob of a woman's shape who's just all pale white and the long black hair. Now in the story, she just makes the guy wake up because he's kind of having a dream. In the movie though, she's going after this one kid and he's in this hospital, and the emergency lights have come on, and so it's bathed in this red hue everywhere. And he's trying to get away, but she just keeps appearing in all the hallways, and then the hallways
runs down.
Yep. Every hallway he runs down, she just comes around the corner, and then the halls start getting smaller and smaller to the point where she just hugs him and absorbs him into her body. And I was like, it's not gory, but God damn, that is a cool scene. Like,
but even before she absorbs him, the way that he's at basically a T intersection.
Yeah.
And he's facing this way, and she's right there. And he turns around, and she's right there. And he turns this way, she's right. And everywhere he turns, she's there and getting closer.
Yeah.
Until she puts his arms around her, and then there's just the one her.
Yeah.
But the fact that there's essentially four?
Yeah, four of her. Yeah.
Just hemming him in. And then, she just absorbs him, and then they find his pen, his little dirty pen.
Yep. She left that behind, so they knew. But yeah, it's an effective scene. Like, and they did the big toe in this too.
Mm-hmm.
The one guy who he looks like an older comedian to me. I want to say Andy Sudeikis. But I'm terrible with names too, so forgive me for that. But he's home alone and like he's talking to his mom on the phone. He's like, "Well, I'm hungry. Is there anything around here to eat?" And he just opens the fridge. He's like, "I'm gonna eat the stew then." And his mom's like, "What stew?"
Yeah,
Stew in the fridge. What do you mean, what
someone made
stew?
a stew.
And they're talking to him on the phone like, "Don't eat anything," and he just keeps mindlessly eating this stew. And I'm like, "I'm sorry, but for me, if I'm in this universe and my friends have already talked to me about this book that's writing stories and killing our other friends, if they tell me to stop eating a soup because it's part of my story, I'm probably going to stop eating the soup." Now, it's either that or because it's happening, he mindlessly just keeps doing it because it's being written that way.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like there were other stories where the people had stuff chasing them and they were in their own accord to get away. So he just kind of kept eating. And I just thought it was weird, but his death was a little bit more of the softer kill of the movie.
Yes,
He just kind of gets dragged into a dark space under his bed, which, yeah, creepy, but, you know, compared to the first guy, the police, the guy in the police station.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Oh, no. I'm just nodding along.
I feel the one character in this movie that I feel like the most out of place was the draft dodger kid.
Mhm.
And I like I said, they wanted to do that paradigm where you had the one kid who was like the mysterious guy who's just in town or whatever, but you get the feeling that they're all either freshmen or sophomores in high school because they don't look very old, you know?
Yeah.
And this kid's just got his own car and he's out on the lam, apparently going from town to town because he's a draft dodger. And it doesn't feel like it fits to me. Because I feel like at some point there would be cops being told like, "Hey, this kid ran away from home. His parents are looking for him." There's none of that. There's like a scene where the one cop tells him he should get out of town because because it is the time period it was in and the kid was Hispanic. So they're just being racist.
Right.
But that's about the most he runs into with trouble from the law. I don't know. I feel like there was a missed opportunity to do more with his character other than just to eventually end up being a love interest for Stella too, because they had to write that in for some fucking reason. But yeah, he just seemed like he didn't belong in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I can see that. All right. Before we finish talking about this, I wanted to mention a book that I have that I cannot find. I think I know where it is. I think it's buried behind about four. I have a very small room that needs to fit thousands of books. So there are stacks and stacks in front of stacks and stacks. But a few years ago, a book came out edited by Jonathan Mayberry called Don't Turn Out the Lights.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which is a tribute to Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And I do not, as I said, I couldn't find it. It's somewhere here. So I don't have an author table of contents or author list or anything. But for those who want some maybe new stories in the same vein, check out Don't Turn Out the Lights, edited by Jonathan Mayberry.
Yeah, definitely check that out.
All right. So before we go, anything else you want to promote? Want to show us Gore one more time?
Sure, I'll show you Gore another time.
Excuse me.
Yeah, there you go. That is on Amazon currently, paperback and ebook. This month, like I said, there will be that anthology that I'm in that's coming out. I'm also working my ass off.
Can you tell us what the anthology is? Or is that still...
I can tell you what the anthology is. It's well, I'll tell you right now, the title I'm not going to remember because it's one of those it's a long title and it's a very good title. I just can't remember it off the top of my head. Let me see. Can I find a post? I just jumped on Twitter real quick here. Come on.
That's what I always have to do. Where did I see that book mentioned?
Yeah, here we go. The Terror of an Unimaginable Horror and the Egregious Dismantling of Reality, an Anthology. That's the title of the book. It's basically, the stories are around, they're all Halloween centered. So mine is, I kind of went with a Goosebumps type of an approach for my short story, because I'm also dabbling with an idea of starting my own series of Goosebumps style books for kids. Nice. So I took my first stab at it with this short story, and I think it turned out pretty good. It's based off of the legend of why we started carving pumpkins. And if you're unfamiliar with that, there is I guess you could call him a specter of sorts called Jack of the Lantern. The reason we carve pumpkins is to keep him away, because he will absorb our souls and take it to purgatory, where he is forever forced to walk around because he tricked the devil. So that's my story.
I knew that because last year I try to do something every Halloween as far as my reading goes. A couple years ago, I just read old, like, paperback from hell, pulpy horror.
Yeah.
But last year I went with every book had to be Halloween themed or take place at Halloween, have Halloween in the title. But I read a nonfiction book that was a history of Halloween.
Yeah.
And going all the way back to the very beginnings and then up to modern traditions and everything. And yeah, that was something that was in there. Something I learned.
There's a lot of really cool lore of like how Halloween came to be. It's very interesting. If you want to keep updates on that book, you can go over to Twitter. His handle is @WB Zervice, Zervice. He's been updating constantly on the progress of the book. And if you're interested in that, I hope you pick up a copy when it comes out.
Cool. Where can people find you online, if you'd care to share that?
Oh God, I'm everywhere. Since Twitter, since the app that was formerly known as Twitter has now become X, social media has fractured out into several different places. And if you search for Matt Wildasin, you're going to find me on most of them that are there. I've been trying to move over to Blue Sky more often and use that as my main place, but I cross promote on Twitter as well. Matt_Wildasin on there on Twitter. So that's, if you can find me there, you'll basically end up finding me everywhere else I'm at. I have a newsletter that's monthly on Substack that also has, at the bottom of the newsletter, will have all of my links to my social medias as well. I will put out one last promotion for myself, just because it's coming out this month as well. I'm working very diligently to get out Horrors Untold Volume 6. Hopefully, I'm looking around like the 20th possibly of this month to get that book out there. And it's I like the cover for this one. People were calling it Fluorescent Werewolf. So nice.
I like the sound of that.
It I not to brag, I like the way it looks. I've been trying to deal with colors more instead of always just doing like blacks, reds, grays, whites, you know.
All right, great. Well, I'll have some links in the description below to some of your books, some of your social media.
Thank you.
Hopefully I'll remember to do that. Okay, if you stick around till after I do my outro. But folks, thank you for watching. As I said, I will have some links for Matt's stuff in the description below. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. Everybody knows how to do all the YouTube stuff.
Yep.
And I think that's all I've got. So thank you once again to Matt for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And folks, until next time, read more books.
Yeah.